Relations between Washington, Beijing, and the U.S.'s North American allies have entered a new intense phase. After Donald Trump announced a new wave of 100% tariffs on Chinese imports, from electronics to rare earth metals, the global market paused, waiting for China's response. But unlike before, China is no longer standing alone. According to reports from the Financial Times, Reuters, and Bloomberg, Canada and Mexico have, for the first time, publicly supported China, condemning the U.S. tariffs as economic aggression that threatens global stability. Last week in Ottawa, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum held a closed-door meeting. According to Politico, the two leaders discussed a joint response to rising American protectionism. Carney reportedly said that the era of Washington's one-sided decisions is over, and that global trade cannot depend on the slogans of one politician. Sheinbaum added that Mexico won't support tariffs that undermine free market values. In a joint press statement, both countries called for global solidarity with nations facing economic pressure, a line that, according to The Economist, marks a dramatic shift in North American diplomacy. Chinese state media welcomed the move. Xinhua called it the beginning of a new era of multilateral cooperation against trade pressure. On the same day, the commerce ministries of China, Canada, and Mexico met online to discuss possible coordinated responses. These included restrictions on rare earth exports and a joint investment fund to help industries hurt by U.S. tariffs. According to Nikkei Asia, the focus is especially on materials vital to U.S. microelectronics and defense. Sources close to the talks say this wasn't spontaneous. As early as September, minister-level consultations had already begun between the three nations to explore an economic resilience alliance, an informal coalition to resist U.S. tariff pressure. One official said, "Washington has benefited from its position without consequences for too long. Now the bill has arrived." Inside the U.S., tensions are rising. The Wall Street Journal reports that some White House advisors described Canada's position as a betrayal, accusing Mexico of siding with Beijing. However, economists argue that both countries are acting in their own long-term interests. While Canada and Mexico still rely on exports to the U.S., they see China as a major opportunity. In both Ottawa and Mexico City, there's growing support for diversifying trade partners. According to CBC and El Universal, both governments are discussing the gradual redirection of strategic exports, from agriculture to tech, toward Asian markets. Mexico is also considering joining China's rare earth and lithium supply chain projects, which would integrate it into China's technological networks. Rare earth elements are a key issue. These materials are critical for making microchips and green energy tech. China controls over 70% of global production, and now plans to cut exports to the U.S. by nearly a third. If Canada and Mexico, which also have reserves of niobium, lanthanum, and neodymium, join in, it could deliver a serious blow to U.S. industry. Sources at the Brookings Institution say Washington was blindsided. The Guardian reports that even the European Union is watching closely. Though officially neutral, EU diplomats reportedly support collective resistance to economic blackmail. For the first time, Canada and Mexico are not acting as just regional partners of the U.S., but as independent players on the global stage. The reaction from U.S. businesses has been quick. CNBC says that companies like General Motors, Boeing, and Tesla have already warned the White House of the risks. A trade war with China, Canada, and Mexico could disrupt supply chains and push up production costs significantly. Still, Trump remains firm. According to Politico, he views the move by Canada and Mexico as betrayal and is threatening countermeasures, including a possible review of the USMCA trade agreement. Meanwhile, behind closed doors at the World Trade Organization, Canada, Mexico, and China are preparing a joint statement condemning unilateral protectionism and expressing their readiness for coordinated retaliation. If released, it would mark the first time that America's closest allies publicly side with China in a trade conflict. The Economist writes that this could be a historic turning point. Canada and Mexico, long tied to the U.S. economy, now seem to be placing their bets on multilateralism, not American dominance. This isn't just a diplomatic protest. It's the early sign of a new world order, where the U.S. no longer dictates the rules alone. According to Goldman Sachs, it's not Europe or Asia, but Canada and Mexico, traditionally quiet allies, who have now become the source of geoeconomic turbulence and China is already moving to deepen the shift. The South China Morning Post reports that Chinese, state-owned companies have offered strategic investments in Canada's lithium and nickel industries, and in infrastructure projects in Mexico. Some diplomats believe this could lead to the formation of a new economic axis that gradually reduces U.S. influence in North America. At the same time, disagreements are heating up in the U.S. Congress. The Washington Post says some Republican senators are demanding an immediate review of trade agreements with Canada and Mexico. Democrats warn that Trump's aggressive trade stance is weakening alliances that took decades to build. A former U.S. diplomat told NPR, "If Canada and Mexico are truly coordinating with China, this marks the end of American exceptionalism in the Western Hemisphere. China is preparing new tariffs. Canada and Mexico may follow with their own. Market instability is expected. Tensions are rising, but one thing is already clear. The old model, where America decides and others follow, is fading. And for the first time in decades, the U.S.'s closest neighbors are no longer standing beside Washington, but across from it."